Between 1835 and 1845, a private religious structure operated quietly in a remote lowland region of Charleston. Despite being listed as a functional parish on civic maps, it was never open to the public. No weddings, funerals, or baptisms were recorded outside a single lineage. The building never expanded and was not staffed by any local diocese. For 32 years, officials permitted the anomaly to continue. The structure remained legally designated as a religious site, despite growing questions over its restricted access and financial exemptions. Charleston Parish was long considered an oddity by local governance. Despite its formal listing as a religious institution, it held no sermons open to the general public. Its operations were handled entirely by one family, whose descendants claimed uninterrupted occupancy. The property maintained tax exemption under religious statutes and received agricultural leniencies under parish protections, even while contributing nothing to the wider community. Multiple oversight requests were filed with municipal clerks between 1838 and 1843. Each time, reports returned inconclusive, and no changes followed. The parish continued quietly, uninterrupted. The official records of Charleston County between 1835 and 1845 reference the existence of a religious structure under the name of St. Raymond Parish. It was situated 2 miles southeast of the Broad River Inlet, enclosed by a series of unmarked property lines that predated current township delineations. The listing on civic ledgers was consistent with other religious buildings in the area, yet it lacked the usual attachments expected of parishes at the time. There was no affiliated cemetery, no schoolhouse, no rectory, and no evidence of seasonal pilgrimage or district-wide attendance. The only recurring name connected to the property was that of a family listed as the Sandwells. The Sandwell name appeared in 4 locations within county archives between 1829 and 1834. Each mention related to private land purchases or agricultural trade. No birth, death, or marriage records under the name were registered prior to that. By 1835, a transfer of ownership placed the full 18-acre tract under the control of Mr. Elias Sandwell, noted as a lay minister by self-appointment in one clerk's marginal note. That designation did not match any ecclesiastical category recognized by regional oversight councils. Still, no objection was filed, and the paperwork passed uncontested. Surveying maps from the period identify the building as a single-room structure with a modest vestibule and 2 storage extensions. A square garden plot bordered its rear perimeter, and 2 wooden outbuildings were marked to the west. No road led directly to the property. The only access came via a footpath branching off from a canal maintenance trail, which was itself unmarked by name on the earliest county registries. Despite its isolation, the parish received formal designation as a site of religious assembly under Statute 12.4 of the Charleston Rural Holdings Act, which allowed landholders to classify private structures for religious use if a congregation was declared. The nature of that congregation was not reviewed. The declaration form, preserved in fragile condition within the county's historical folio, was submitted and signed solely by Elias Sandwell. It listed 17 names beneath his own, all bearing the Sandwell surname. No occupations, titles, or ages were indicated. The entire document fit on a half-page of parchment, and no secondary witnesses were named. Under the Act, no formal inquiry was necessary so long as the declaration remained uncontested by nearby property holders. None were within 2 miles, and the declaration stood. The 1836 Civic Review, conducted as part of an annual land status update, noted the existence of the parish and its operational continuity. A field assessor visited the site but marked it present but unenterable due to non-response. Under protocol, refusal of entry by private religious assemblies was permitted if tax exemptions were not under question. Since no discrepancy had been flagged in the property's valuation or its tithe exemptions, no follow-up inspection was scheduled. By 1838, the property had expanded its classification to include agricultural exception status under a supplementary rule, allowing parishes to cultivate food crops without tax liability if intended for congregational consumption. The Sandwell Declaration was refiled, this time with 21 names. Again, All bore the same surname, and again, no external witnesses were listed. The structure remained unchanged on maps. No structural growth was recorded. The congregation list had increased, but the size of the building had not. County scribes began informally referring to it as the family parish in administrative side notes. While not part of the official documentation, this label was repeated enough across different clerks' hands to suggest a widely shared perception. Yet despite mild bureaucratic curiosity, there was no formal move to investigate. Local governance at the time was inconsistent and largely reactive. With no complaints and no legal infraction, the site was left alone. Several letters archived under the Charleston General Correspondence Register from the early 1840s contain references to the parish by name. Most appear in the context of regional census preparations, with assessors asking whether the site was to be counted as a public structure. Each time, the response from the registrar's office was the same. Registered as religious under standing declaration, no change to status. The repetition of this phrase, copied identically in multiple years, suggests that a template reply had been adopted. There was no apparent effort to revise or question it. The parish remained insulated by two protective legal categories: religious exemption and family status. As a family-run place of worship, it was shielded from public scrutiny under privacy clauses granted to religious declarations filed under single-family ownership. These clauses had been introduced to prevent misuse of state oversight in cases involving small, home-based congregations. While intended for urban use, they applied equally to rural settings. The combination of these protections made it nearly impossible to assess the parish's function. There were no parishioners from outside the family to interview, no correspondence was received from the property, and no records were submitted voluntarily. Yet its legal status remained intact. No violations were documented, and no calls for revocation were formally made. By the time of the 1844 Civic Review, the site was listed as unchanged with private access. The same phrase appeared in 3 other records that year, all related to religious buildings with minimal community presence. The phrase became a de facto categorization used for structures that technically complied with statute but operated beyond practical verification. The Charleston Parish, as it came to be known in local shorthand, was the most enduring example. Community awareness of the parish was minimal. Few maps distributed beyond municipal offices included it. Agricultural reports referenced its landholdings under the general label of communal yield, rather than naming it directly. When neighboring property changed hands in 1845, new owners filed a notice of adjacency, requesting clarification on the identity of the parish's stewards. The reply from the registrar was brief: private family congregation under continued exemption, no external engagement expected. What stood out most in these records was the consistency of disinterest. No official ever attempted to override or question the family's exclusive use of the site. At no point did any diocese object to the self-appointed ministerial title of Elias Sandwell or his successors. The structure remained untouched by both civic and religious oversight, suspended in a legal category of its own making. There were no confirmed sightings of public gatherings on the property, no seasonal events, no notices, no civic participation. The only signs of activity were intermittent supply purchases filed under the Sandwell name at a rural goods depot 16 miles away. These transactions, while infrequent, showed consistency in item type: cloth, paper, salt, seed, and tools. Nothing indicative of trade beyond subsistence was ever recorded. What had formed over those years was an enclosed system that qualified as religious only through legal phrasing, not through observable function. It continued to receive exemption without providing service. It maintained land without offering access. And each time the question of its legitimacy surfaced within municipal correspondence, it was met with the same sentence: no change to status. By the late 1840s, references to the Charleston Parish had largely vanished from regional documentation. The site was still listed in land records and continued to be marked on assessor maps as a religious exemption zone, yet its presence in correspondence, census notes, and civic reviews became increasingly rare. This administrative silence did not indicate dissolution. Instead, it suggested stabilization. Once classified under a persistent exemption category, the parish no longer required annual updates unless triggered by a legal change, property sale, or formal complaint. None occurred. The Sandwell name remained confined to agricultural filings and 2 minor mentions in rural court logs, neither of which involved the parish directly. One concerned a boundary clarification with a neighboring timber lease. The other involved delayed payment for an ox harness. In both cases, the Sandwell family was represented by handwritten affidavits submitted by courier, not in person. The handwriting on the documents was identified by a clerk as similar to that on the original 1835 declaration. The implication was that a single person, or closely related individuals, had managed all external correspondence for nearly 2 decades. Local accounts from residents of nearby settlements during the 1850s occasionally mention the parish as a geographical reference point. Phrases such as "past the Sandwell lot" or "east beyond the quiet church" appear in personal letters archived in the Charleston Rural Communications Folio. These letters rarely express curiosity. The parish was considered a known but unremarkable landmark. It was seen, at most, as a static property that served no wider function. Travel logs by surveyors and road crews working near the inland water routes do make note of the site. In one 1853 field book, a crew member recorded, "Old frame structure, East Ridge, painted white once, now near colorless, no sign of active use. Curtain across main window." Another notation from 1856 reads, "Past the Sandwell post, path overgrown, one figure near the entrance but no approach made." These entries did not raise concern. Such comments were treated as travel observations, not evidence requiring action. The parish's ability to persist without change was partly a function of its legal classification. As long as no violation was filed, the building retained its right to exist without engagement. Moreover, its religious status shielded it from standard civic procedures. For example, when the 1859 land use realignment proposed adjusting the district boundaries, the parish plot was left unaltered. Notes in the adjustment record suggest that the property was considered non-integrated and thus not subject to civic redistribution. Meanwhile, the Sandwell name remained absent from school rosters, medical registries, and regional census rolls. While not unprecedented in rural areas, it was unusual for a household of more than a dozen individuals, as implied by the original declaration, to leave no imprint across such systems. This administrative absence led to quiet speculation among junior clerks. Marginalia from a newly assigned registrar in 1861 questioned whether the declaration list was still valid. No action followed. Attempts to verify the congregation's composition were sporadic and inconclusive. In 1863, a clerical trainee included the parish in a broader inquiry into unaccounted land occupants. The request, however, was rejected by his supervisor, who noted that religious exemptions fell outside the scope of routine population checks. The inquiry was filed but not followed. Its inclusion was noted in an internal memo titled "Irregular Holdings, No Further Action." The broader legal framework of the time contributed to this pattern. Following the Religious Land Statute Addendum of 1849, any site with a continuous record of exemption exceeding 10 years was eligible for automatic grandfather status. This status made it nearly immune to reassessment barring legal action or voluntary reclassification. The Charleston parish qualified without contest. By 1865, it was no longer being listed for annual review. Photographic documentation of the parish is limited. A single glass plate image from 1871, held in a private collection and later catalogued by the Charleston Preservation Office, shows a structure matching the surveyor descriptions. It is a simple building with vertical siding, a wooden cross mounted above the entrance, and 2 shuttered side windows. The roof appears intact. No people are visible in the image. The photograph is labeled "Old Sandwell House of Worship," though it is unclear whether this title reflects local nomenclature or the photographer's own designation. Regional directories produced in the 1870s list the property in 2 places: under the Religious Structures Index and the Agricultural Holdings Register. This dual listing was rare and raised a procedural question among archivists, but no corrective action was taken. When a field agent submitted a query to the Charleston Office of Exempt Properties, asking whether dual classification violated statute, he received a brief reply: permitted under dual function clause, no discrepancy found. By this time, the name Sandwell had begun to disappear from other records entirely. The last documented purchase at the Rural Goods Depot attributed to the family occurred in 1872. The transaction included basic supplies: twine, writing materials, dried beans, and fabric. The signature on the receipt is partially illegible, but bears resemblance to prior entries. After that, no confirmed transactions under that name appear in any known registry. Despite this, the parish property remained legally protected. Its status was never challenged. The lack of trade or correspondence from the family was interpreted not as dissolution, but as a continuation of privacy. The site's compliance was determined by its consistency, not its visibility. As long as no external claims were made and no laws were broken, the property remained undisturbed. In 1878, a regional consolidation effort by the Charleston Office of Land Affairs proposed the elimination of dormant religious exemptions. A report was assembled to identify inactive sites, defined as those with no civic engagement for 20 years or more. The Charleston Parish qualified. However, a note from the committee head stated, "Site long recognized, no community complaint. Advise exclusion from review." The parish was thus removed from the list prior to action. There is limited personal testimony regarding the parish from residents of that era. A letter dated 1881 from a schoolteacher in a neighboring district includes a brief mention: "Children ask about the quiet church with the closed shutters. I tell them it is not ours to question." Another letter from a traveling herbalist in 1884 notes, "Past the Sandwell path. Nothing stirred. As always." By 1890, the parish no longer appeared on updated civic planning documents. However, this omission did not reflect a revocation of its status. Rather, it resulted from a shift in cartographic priorities. Properties without road access or measurable economic output were increasingly excluded from general maps to conserve space. The Charleston Parish remained a legal entity, its exemption still present in older registries, but its active monitoring ceased entirely. In the final audit of rural religious sites, conducted before the century's end, the parish was absent from the list of properties flagged for inspection. The document, titled Final Review of Non-Compliant Congregations, compiled in 1895, cross-referenced tax records, population rolls, and site inspections. The Charleston Parish did not appear in any column. There was no annotation, no footnote, and no corrective mark. The site had become effectively invisible to administrative processes. Its legal status, however, was never revoked. The land remained zoned as religious, with its usage frozen under a statute no longer subject to contemporary review. No application for repurposing was filed. No sale was recorded. The Sandwell name, once the sole identifier of the congregation, faded from public documentation entirely. Yet the structure remained, still recognized by law as a place of worship, despite the absence of congregation, clergy, or public memory. The first recorded attempt to reassess Charleston Parish under revised oversight procedures occurred in 1893. A clerk named Matthew Dallam, recently appointed to the Regional Subdivision of Exempt Properties, undertook a personal initiative to reconcile inconsistencies in the county's aging religious land. Registry. He compiled a handwritten ledger titled Unverified Sites, Request for Clarification, which listed 14 properties whose exemption status had not been reviewed since before the 1870 statute change. Among them was the Sandwell-held Charleston Parish. Dallam's concern was procedural, not investigative. His margin notes indicate that his intention was to update records to align with revised cartographic standards. He filed a form requesting authorization to initiate contact with the current landholder. The request was passed to the county registrar's office, where it remained unprocessed for 4 months. During this time, Dalham annotated 3 separate follow-ups, each more detailed than the last. He included survey map excerpts, copies of the original 1835 declaration, and a handwritten summary of the site's exemption trajectory. By the time his request reached the attention of his supervisor, the office was undergoing internal reorganization. Several positions had been reassigned, and staffing was limited. A decision was made to postpone all non-essential reviews. Dalham received no formal reply. However, internal routing slips show that his ledger was reviewed and marked with the designation "Hold Pending Staff Increase." No date for re-evaluation was given. While the attempt did not proceed beyond documentation, it remains the earliest known instance of a civil employee attempting to bring the parish's status into compliance with updated standards. What stood out was not the content of Dalham's inquiry, but the absence of reaction it generated. No counter-arguments were made, no objections were raised. The ledger was neither dismissed nor disputed. It was simply archived. 2 years later, in 1895, a separate document surfaced in the context of district land reform. The Charleston Office of Infrastructure circulated a report identifying potential barriers to route expansion. In it, the parish was mentioned not by name, but as a structure of unknown occupancy impeding optimal path adjustment. The document suggested rerouting around the property to avoid disruption of unclear designation. Once again, instead of pursuing clarification, officials chose to bypass the site entirely. Despite these administrative moments, no direct observation or contact with the property was initiated. The pattern remained consistent. Once acknowledged, the site was treated as a special category to be avoided rather than reclassified. The repetition of this treatment across departments indicated more than bureaucratic neglect. It reflected a broader institutional posture in which legal inertia and procedural ambiguity served as barriers to engagement. Meanwhile, outside official documentation, the property maintained a faint presence in personal accounts. Letters from local residents, archived in private collections and later digitized by historical preservation efforts, occasionally refer to the building as a static point in the landscape. One 1896 letter from a postmaster's assistant to his sister includes the note, "The old white house with its still windows looks just the same as when we were children." The tone is observational, with no suggestion of mystery or danger. The structure is treated as a fixture, not a subject of interest. A school ledger from 1897 recorded a request by a student to know why the building had no school bell or visitors. The teacher's response, written in the margin, reads, "Not a public place, no reason to inquire further." These small references reveal the extent to which the parish's isolation had become normalized. The community acknowledged its presence, but had no expectation of interaction. In this way, the site remained outside both civic concern and local curiosity. The lack of inquiry was reinforced by the structure's physical inaccessibility. Its position off an unmarked trail, combined with overgrowth and lack of signage, discouraged incidental visitation. Additionally, the absence of any recorded approach from religious authorities meant there were no scheduled inspections or assigned visits. This further reduced the possibility of incidental scrutiny. In an 1898 report from the Charleston County Cartography Subdivision, a draft recommendation was made to fully remove the parish from updated district maps. The argument was that maintaining symbols for sites of unverifiable activity introduced confusion into new route and service planning. The suggestion was approved internally, but delayed in implementation due to a backlog of other mapping updates. The parish's symbol was eventually excluded from all county-issued maps beginning in 1900, although no formal delisting occurred. This cartographic erasure marked a turning point. Without representation on official charts, the parish's physical reality began to drift from administrative recognition. No new documentation linked to the site emerged in the 5 years that followed. While technically still protected under grandfathered exemption laws, its absence from planning materials rendered it functionally invisible. It was during this period that a private academic named Florence Mallory, an archivist affiliated with a historical society in Columbia, undertook a regional study of religious exemptions in pre-war South Carolina. Her research, conducted between 1899 and 1902, involved the review of early declarations, tax records and architectural drawings. Mallory's surviving notes mention the Charleston Parish by name only once. Her phrasing was brief: Sandwell congregation, no exterior trace of public function, status unclear. Mallory's work was not focused on institutional accountability. Her study aimed to document building styles and land use patterns. Yet even within that limited framework, she noted the parish's exemption history as anomalous. Her interest did not lead to further exploration. Like others before her, she left the entry incomplete, adding a bracketed note: no data beyond 1872. Further inquiry not pursued. At the institutional level, the Charleston Parish had become a point of procedural avoidance. Officials knew of its existence, understood its exemption, and chose each time not to intervene. This was not due to fear or superstition, but rather to a consistent prioritization of administrative efficiency over comprehensive review. The site posed no known threat, generated no complaints, and fell within a legal category that allowed non-engagement. As years passed, the parish's memory became increasingly tied to internal documents rather than public awareness. Its presence on property rolls, exemption registries, and agricultural logs was noted only in archival summaries. Field agents trained after 1900 had no reason to visit the site, and its omission from updated training materials ensured that new staff remained unaware of its classification. The last known institutional mention of the Charleston Parish prior to its full archival retirement came in the form of an annotation in the 1903 Register of Dormant Exemptions. The entry, written in pencil, reads, "No verification, no correspondence, do not include inactive list." The record bears no signature. It was not entered into the main ledger. Instead, it was found attached as a note to the inside cover of the report, folded and loosely affixed. There is no indication that any official action followed. By this point, the building itself had become a private object, preserved by inertia rather than oversight. The original exemption remained legally in place, yet no one actively monitored its status. The Sandwell name was no longer listed in any form of civic documentation. No living claimants had come forward. The structure had passed beyond practical concern, preserved in legal categories that no longer aligned with contemporary practice. Despite this, the building continued to appear in occasional references from those living nearby. A letter from a railway supervisor in 1904 includes a passing mention: "That old house east of the feeder path remains untouched, still no signs of use. It holds the landscape the way a forgotten milepost might." The remark is included not as a report, but as a personal aside, a reflection on the persistence of landmarks with no present purpose. In this way, Charleston Parish maintained its position not through secrecy or denial, but through a sustained sequence of overlooked signs, deferred questions, and incomplete reviews. Each time the opportunity arose to clarify its function or confirm its use, those responsible chose instead to leave the matter unresolved. The building remained exempt, the property remained classified, the records remained intact. The continued omission of Charleston Parish from all updated materials throughout the early 20th century had the secondary effect of gradually obscuring its legal trail. While the original declarations, exemption ledgers, and inspection summaries remained physically stored within county archives, the cross-referencing mechanisms used to track their relevance were slowly phased out. By 1906, a revised indexing system no longer included the parish's identifier among active properties. This did not remove the exemption itself, but it severed the record's visibility from day-to-day administrative processes. That year, a state initiative sought to streamline property classification by migrating selected paper records into a central ledger series. Charleston Parish was not chosen for inclusion. The decision was not the result of a review, but rather a filtering rule. Properties not mentioned in official correspondence within the past 10 years were excluded by default. This placed the parish into an inactive tier, where its continued status would require intentional retrieval from legacy files. No such retrieval occurred. The physical building, meanwhile, received minimal attention. A 1907 soil survey mentions an uninhabited frame structure along the inland ridge but does not label it. The accompanying map omits any icon or annotation. Interviews conducted for the survey do not include references to its use. The property is shown as part of an uncultivated tract, adjacent to wetland grading, but within no marked development zone. In 1910, an early land valuation manual produced for internal training by the Charleston Department of Rural Holdings includes an uncaptioned photograph in a section titled "Structures Not Under Review." The image matches the known architecture of the parish: a low gabled roof, paneled door, closed shutters, and overgrown pathway. The photograph appears as a visual example of properties considered exempt by procedural legacy. No text accompanies the image. It is not identified by name or location. Its inclusion serves only to illustrate a category no longer in use. The administrative consensus had solidified. The parish was not disputed, but neither was it integrated. It existed at the edge of institutional memory, protected by formal inaction. Its legacy files remained preserved, but unaccessed, maintained by default rather than purpose. No ordinance removed its exemption. No new rule displaced its classification. Its persistence became less an active decision and more the result of cumulative omission. The site's visibility diminished accordingly. By the 1910s, regional maps produced for commercial or residential planning made no mention of it. No signage marked its access route. The footpath, long since excluded from municipal maintenance, became part of a disused drainage corridor. Local references to the structure declined in frequency. Oral histories collected during the 1920s from long-time residents contain sparse mention. When the building is recalled at all, it is usually in vague terms: the quiet place, get the closed house dirt, or the white church past the reeds. These labels lacked precision and did not provoke inquiry. During this period, a shift occurred in the county's legal framework for religious exemptions. The 1913 revision to the Exemption Continuity Act mandated that all structures previously grandfathered under pre-1890 declarations be refiled within a 3-year window. Notices were mailed to property owners at their last known addresses. In the case of Charleston Parish, the record lists a delivery attempt to an unoccupied lot. The mail was marked undeliverable and returned. Under the statute, a failure to respond within the refile window did not trigger revocation, but moved the property into a dormant classification. This change formalized the parish's new category: exempt by legacy, but frozen in administrative dormancy. It remained protected under past rulings, but was no longer eligible for reactivation without a full structural reassessment. Such reassessments were not initiated unless prompted by property transactions, ownership disputes, or redevelopment requests. None occurred for Charleston Parish. Archival staff responsible for managing legacy files began consolidating inactive records. The parish's folder was merged into a bulk, holding under the heading Non-Responsive Sites Religious. This category required no updates, generated no reports, and remained unlisted in public-facing indexes. The only way to locate its materials was by internal reference number, which itself became outdated during a filing system change in 1924. The folder was placed in a storage unit designated for redundant but legally protected documents. Despite the complete absence of administrative motion, the structure itself remained standing. Field reports from agricultural agents during the 1930s occasionally reference the white frame house near the canal rise. Descriptions remained neutral. One entry in a 1933 irrigation note includes the remark, "No interference, structure intact, grounds undisturbed." No ownership claim had been filed, no encroachment was reported. In the absence of legal or functional disruption, the building acquired the status of a fixed landscape feature. It was not engaged, visited, or monitored, but its presence was considered normal within its setting. Locals familiar with the geography identified it as a non-participatory landmark. Its use was unknown. Its purpose was unexamined. The property had, by this stage, passed entirely into the realm of accepted irrelevance. The 1940 census, which included rural property descriptions as part of a national classification effort, did not list the parish. A field supervisor's notation from that year, acknowledged several unmapped structures along the canal basin, but none were flagged for follow-up. The parish's location, still technically recorded in the 1835 Land Declaration coordinates, had become difficult to reconcile with modern mapping. The trail once leading to it was now discontinuous, and surrounding areas had shifted due to erosion and redirected water flow. In 1947, a research project sponsored by the State University attempted to trace the evolution of private religious sites across South Carolina. The parish was not included. When interviewed decades later, one of the researchers stated that no mention of the site had appeared in their preparatory materials. Its legal file was not retrieved. The property had, in effect, vanished from institutional knowledge, yet the land was never sold, subdivided, or reclassified. Tax exemption continued automatically under the dormant clause. No lien was placed. No record of trespass or boundary violation was filed. The structure remained untouched by development. It had no tenants, no declared function, and no formal role. But it remained legal. The final known administrative reference to the site occurred in 1952. A reassessment of drainage rights along the inland canal included a note about one structure not under jurisdiction due to religious designation. The phrase appears in the appendix of a flood mitigation report. No structure name was given, no follow-up inspection was ordered. The file was archived, no further entries followed. From that point forward, all institutional documentation concerning Charleston Parish ceased. No mention was found in development plans, tax rolls, educational reports, or property adjustments. The site had passed completely from civic awareness. Its files, preserved only by procedural inertia, remained untouched in deep storage. Its status as a religious exemption was never revoked. Its classification as a congregation remained legally intact. No new documentation has surfaced. No individual or family has laid claim to its name. The Sandwell lineage, once declared as a full congregation, left no further imprint on public records. The structure persists only in the background of aged photographs, unnamed in any caption. The property is not for sale. It is not listed as abandoned. It exists as a dormant religious entity preserved by the continuity of unexamined legality. The Charleston Parish entered the mid-20th century, untouched by administrative development and increasingly absent from regional memory. Despite this, two isolated efforts to trace its origin and status emerged during the 1960s from unrelated sectors. Both were initiated independently, and neither was prompted by legal interest. Their findings, partial and ultimately inconclusive, marked the first attempts in over half a century to engage with the site's historical presence. The first originated in 1961 from a graduate thesis project at a state university. The researcher, enrolled in a history program focusing on unincorporated religious communities in the antebellum South, included the Sandwell Declaration among a list of properties with unresolved exemption. Trajectories. Using archival methods available at the time, the researcher located the original 1835 filing, the 1838 Agricultural Amendment, and 4 additional notations spanning until 1872. No documentation was found beyond that point. The thesis manuscript, preserved in microfilm format, included a 7-page section titled Enclosed Entities, the Sandwell Parish. The section details the unbroken exemption status, the absence of public congregational records, and the unchanged classification of the property across multiple legal revisions. The author makes no claims regarding the family's intentions, stating only, "This case presents a unique legal survival mechanism, reliant not on community interaction, but on procedural gaps and regional disinterest." The second inquiry came in 1964, prompted by a cartographic historian affiliated with the State Museum. His project focused on identifying discrepancies between 19th century rural land maps and modern survey systems. Charleston Parish appeared on several pre-1900 maps, but was absent from all subsequent editions. Seeking to reconcile the gap, he conducted field visits to multiple locations identified as historical congregation sites. Upon reaching the grid coordinates listed in the 1835 declaration, the historian located the building. It was intact, He noted in his field diary that the structure exhibited signs of weathering, but no structural collapse. The shutters were closed. The door was secured. A growth of vine had begun to overtake the lower facade. No access path was visible, though tire tracks suggested recent proximity by foot or vehicle. He did not attempt entry. His remark was brief. Structure matches archival elevation drawings. No signage. Condition stable. No interaction attempted. This note, later stored with the museum's research files, is the only verified mid-century visual confirmation of the building. No further investigation followed. The historian's project concluded without a published paper, and his fieldwork was filed with low-priority archival materials. The Charleston Parish entry received no additional annotation. In 1970, a records consolidation initiative moved dormant religious files from county to state storage. The Charleston Parish exemption ledger was reassigned a new identifier code, but remained categorized as no action required. The transfer document shows the file was logged, boxed, and shelved without revision. The exemption remained in place. No reclassification was initiated. In the following years, sporadic mentions of the building surfaced in informal correspondence and local publications. A 1975 issue of a rural historical newsletter included a reader submission referencing an old frame church outside the water track, kept in fair shape but never used. The submission included no source or location. An editor's note appended to the letter asked for further information. No reply was published. By 1980, the parish no longer featured in any known religious, civic, or land use documentation. Its legal exemption had not been renewed, but neither had it been revoked. As per the terms of the 1913 statute revision, the absence of reclassification meant the property retained its dormant status indefinitely, unless sold or claimed for redevelopment. Neither condition was met. In 1982, a county-led land digitization effort briefly reintroduced the name Sandwell into database indexing when scanning legacy exemption files. The parish was assigned a reference string linking its original declaration with its last known land coordinates. However, because the record was classified under dormant exemption, it did not appear on public-facing platforms. The name was indexed internally, but inaccessible without administrative clearance. That same year, a university field study led by a postgraduate urban planner included the structure in a visual catalogue of historical rural architecture. A black and white photograph was taken from a roadside distance. The image shows the parish partly obscured by foliage. No individuals are visible. The building appears structurally intact, with a slight tilt to one side. The caption reads, "Unmarked religious structure, no access, status unknown." No follow-up report was filed. The catalogue, later printed as a limited distribution booklet, included the image without identifying it as Charleston Parish. However, comparison with earlier records confirms the match. This photograph remains the most recent known visual record of the building in its documented condition. In 1987, a real estate survey conducted in preparation for regional zoning adjustments noted the land parcel as unsurveyed religious holding. The surveyor included a footnote indicating that while the lot appeared vacant, the historical classification required deferral to archival files before any reallocation. The footnote included no recommendation. The zoning team removed the parcel from redevelopment consideration. Its status remained unchanged. An attempt to locate property heirs was made in 1991 as part of a broader initiative to resolve untitled parcels. The registry office ran a series of database queries using names from historical declarations. The Sandwell surname produced no active matches. Without a claimant, and lacking any formal challenge to its exemption, the parish property remained legally dormant. The query was filed and closed with a resolution code indicating non-locatable legacy. During a 1995 compliance sweep of properties exempt from taxes due to religious classification, the Charleston Parish identifier was flagged for review. However, internal notes indicate that its dormancy status, inherited from previous rulings, made it ineligible for reassessment without legislative override. A recommendation to initiate contact was overruled based on the legal precedent of non-engagement with dormant exemptions unless prompted by land dispute. No such dispute existed. As part of that same compliance effort, a temporary placeholder record was created within the county's digital database. This record marked inactive but not revoked, linked back to the original 1835 declaration. The only update added was a notation indicating the parcel had not generated tax correspondence in over a century. No owner contact was listed, the record was archived and never updated. The Charleston Parish thus remained in a state of procedural equilibrium. All known inquiries into its operation ended without outcome. The building itself, confirmed to be intact on multiple occasions across several decades, remained outside the scope of redevelopment, reassessment or revocation. It had passed through legal systems and historical projects alike without provoking action. It was neither forgotten nor remembered. Its name existed on paper, its structure existed in place, but no entity engaged with it. Public memory of the site declined accordingly. By the end of the 20th century, local guidebooks, maps, and planning documents included no reference. The parish was not listed in historical registries, preservation zones, or tour routes. No organization claimed stewardship. No private owner filed for renovation. The land remained untouched. Into the early 2000s, Charleston Parish remained designated in official records as an exempt religious property under dormant status. No intervention had occurred. The land had neither changed hands nor been subject to sale inquiry. Its structure, having received no confirmed renovation or utility connection, remained classified as non-residential. The last known interaction involving the parcel came in the form of an automated archival summary logged during the 2002 digitization of dormant properties. The summary listed the parish's identifier, exemption status, and absence of ownership contact. No further digital updates followed. During a 2006 academic conference on land governance in rural regions, a panelist cited Charleston Parish as a case of indefinite exemption through procedural abstraction. The reference was brief and received little attention. The panelist, an urban policy researcher, later clarified in a publication that the parish file was among several cases reviewed during a study on legacy exemptions. Her assessment was limited to the legal mechanics involved. She had not visited the site and had no evidence of its physical condition. In 2009, a contractor working with a historical preservation agency submitted a grant proposal to document former religious sites with unresolved use status. The proposal included Charleston Parish as one of 18 locations. The committee reviewing the proposal declined to allocate funding for the project, citing lack of current ownership data and the unclear applicability of preservation statutes to dormant religious designations. The location received no further consideration. The grant was not awarded. In 2013, a non-profit specializing in documenting isolated structures used aerial mapping to catalog sites across several counties. An unnamed structure in the approximate location of the Charleston Parish was noted as extant, weathered, unoccupied. The aerial image captured a rectangular roof, partially obscured by vegetation. No pathway or visible signage appeared in the frame. The image resolution did not allow for positive identification. The structure was marked as a candidate for follow-up photography. No additional images were submitted. During a 2016 legislative audit of tax-exempt lands, the parish appeared in an appendix of unresolved exemptions. The entry listed the parcel's exemption origin, date of last verified contact, and its dormant classification. The report's recommendation section included a placeholder sentence. Pending case requires legal clarification before any revocation. The footnote referenced a statute that had been superseded twice. A correction was noted, but no action was taken. The file remained active under its dormant code. An internal memo dated April 2017 within the Department of Land Status Review suggested archiving non-claimant dormant exemptions under a new classification. The memo proposed removing such properties from annual audit cycles by transferring them to historical reference only. Charleston Parish was included in the test list. The transition was never enacted. Staffing changes and unrelated procedural delays caused the reclassification proposal to be tabled indefinitely. By 2018, the site no longer triggered automatic review in the state's land system. Its exemption remained visible only through legacy records. The structure itself had not been photographed in over 3 decades. Access required navigating undeveloped terrain with no marked trail. The parish was not included in any emergency service coverage maps or zoning overlays. No infrastructure planning referenced the parcel. It remained outside the path of roads, utilities, and survey points. In 2019, a private land researcher preparing a dissertation on overlooked religious properties located the Charleston Parish exemption through a dormant status index. Upon submitting a records request, she received a digital scan of the original 1835 filing and several subsequent exemptions through the 1870s. She noted in her draft manuscript that the property appeared unique in its ability to maintain protected status without active participation or visible upkeep. The researcher attempted to contact the State Department for clarification on whether the exemption remained legally binding. She received an automated response indicating that dormant religious parcels were not subject to current review unless tied to an open legal transaction. No such transaction existed. The researcher's manuscript, which remained unpublished, concluded that the parish presented an unresolved example of exemption persistence beyond institutional oversight. No additional efforts followed. No physical visit was recorded. No agency listed the site for inspection or field confirmation. The building's condition, occupants if any, and usage remained unverified. The designation held. By 2021, the parish's exemption number was removed from active tax rolls and shifted to an inactive tier within the dormant land registry. The number was preserved, but no longer appeared in summary audits. Its retrieval required targeted database access by classification code. The system used for these records was not integrated into broader property search functions. As a result, the parish ceased to appear in routine property queries. In the spring of 2023, an update to county zoning software excluded dormant religious properties from parcel overlays. This adjustment affected a small number of plots, among them the Charleston Parish site. The exclusion was documented in a changelog, citing low access frequency and lack of reclassification attempts. No note was added regarding the status of the building. The structure's exemption remained in force. In December 2024, a public inquiry tool developed by a regional planning office included the parish identifier in a list of legacy codes for archival interest. The list was published online for a brief period. It drew no substantial attention. Within 6 weeks, the feature was removed following a routine website update. No user reports had been filed regarding the parish. As of early 2025, the Charleston Parish remained legally classified as a religious structure under dormant exemption. Its exemption had not been revoked. Its land had not been subdivided or sold. Its interior had not been documented. No civil or religious body had issued a statement regarding its purpose, history, or occupants. The original declaration naming the Sandwell family as its sole congregation continued to serve as the only document affirming its use. There was no sign that the parish's status would be altered. Legislative revisions in recent years had not addressed the handling of dormant exemptions predating the 20th century. No proposals had been filed to reassess such properties. No claims had been made. The site's existence remained acknowledged only through silent retention. Its survival did not depend on secrecy or misdirection. It was the product of accumulated procedural avoidance, institutional disinterest, and the endurance of legal categories created without provisions for long-term disengagement. Charleston Parish existed precisely because no one had ever been compelled to engage with it. It had not been removed because no process had been triggered to remove it. It had not been questioned because no official had been tasked to question it. It had not been surveyed because no agency had included it in their scope of work. Its endurance, though unusual, followed a sequence of uninterrupted logic. Each system it passed through deferred the question of purpose to the next. As a result, it remained a legally recognized site of religious activity, protected by rights no longer examined, preserved by records no longer referenced. Its presence on land once declared in the name of a single family continued without renewal or rejection. Charleston Parish remained what it had always been, a structure standing in place, insulated by history, shielded by oversight that never came. In 2025, the Charleston Parish exemption continued to occupy its unique position within state land records. The structure, originally declared under religious use by a single family and never opened to public assembly, remained formally protected under laws no longer applied elsewhere. Its preservation was not the result of intentional conservation, nor the focus of heritage interest. Instead, it persisted through institutional default, held in place by archival procedures that had simply not been interrupted. Researchers who encountered the parish's legal trace during broader data searches often described it as an anomaly. In documentation forums and municipal research exchanges, it appeared sporadically as a reference point for dormant exemptions with intact designations. In every instance, it was marked as unchallenged, untouched, and procedurally resolved by inaction. Its lack of change over time made it stable, if unresolved. A research technician with the Department of Geographic Integration flagged the parish entry during a 2025 scan for improperly categorized properties. His initial review was based solely on classification filters, which identified the site as active under an obsolete religious exemption code. The technician prepared a change request, citing outdated mapping logic and inconsistencies in database taxonomy. However, before the request was submitted, a senior reviewer appended a note: "Do not alter legacy status. Dormant exemption file. No active override." The entry was left intact. In administrative systems, the Charleston Parish no longer required explanation. It existed within a closed loop of legacy exception, no longer visible to public access tools and not scheduled for reassessment. No violations had been logged. No complaints had been filed. There was no indication of trespass, occupancy, or redevelopment. Its classification stood because no event had disrupted its placement. The building's physical status remained unverified. No digital survey platforms included recent photographs. Remote sensing datasets, used primarily for agricultural and urban expansion tracking, showed the outline of a rectangular object in the location described in historical records. The object appeared unchanged between 2017 and 2023 scans. Vegetation density increased at its perimeter. No utility lines were registered on the parcel. No known permit had been filed for connection. Although not officially recognized as a site of interest, the parish occasionally resurfaced in local history circles. In March 2025, an independent archival website included it in a list of unresolved legal congregations. A feature focused on structures with exemption status but no observable use. The accompanying entry contained only basic information: year declared, name of filer, and location. No commentary or theory was added. Readers shared the page without context. Within a few weeks, the listing was removed during a content update cycle. There was no documented effort by preservation agencies to include the site in historical frameworks. The Charleston Parish was never nominated for registry, nor did it receive informal attention through walking tours, guides, or digital heritage platforms. Its absence from the narrative of regional religious development was not due to exclusion, but rather its lack of participation. There were no known congregational events, no officiated ceremonies, and no community use. It could not be placed within any active lineage or denominational history. The property was omitted from emergency planning materials due to its dormant classification and lack of access routes. It did not appear in fire zone maps, flood contingency models, or hazard assessment tools. These systems prioritized properties with verified structures and known occupancy. Since the parish met neither condition, it was excluded from consideration. The site was not coded for priority response. In education contexts, the parish was almost never referenced. Local school districts, when teaching about early religious architecture or land policy, did not include its case. Textbooks used statewide did not mention dormant exemptions by name. Although a few university-level theses had cited the parish in limited scope, none had resulted in sustained academic attention. It remained a secondary case in research, used primarily to illustrate administrative continuity. One department within the Office of Legal Records conducted an internal exercise in late 2025 to identify parcels classified under religious exemptions with no recent documentation. The goal was to evaluate whether state policy needed revision concerning legacy designations. Among the 32 parcels reviewed, Charleston Parish was flagged as the longest unaltered entry. However, the final summary report advised no action. The note read, "Procedural dormancy observed, not an operational priority." The decision was consistent with long-standing precedent. Over the decades, various offices had encountered the parish's file and declined to engage further. In each case, the absence of conflict, transaction, or dispute allowed the exemption to persist without challenge. The classification had effectively become self-sustaining, maintained by the structure of the system around it. No state agency bore exclusive responsibility for dormant religious designations. Oversight was distributed, with each department referencing the exemption only when it intersected with a specific procedure. Since the Charleston Parish had not intersected with any such procedure in over a century, it was rarely invoked. Its legacy file, shelved in a low-access tier, was preserved but not reviewed. There was no trigger in place that would initiate such a review. Despite its isolation, the parish remained one of the longest-standing unmodified religious declarations in the region. No subsequent entity had attempted to replicate its model. The statutory conditions that had permitted its formation were no longer in effect. New religious filings were subject to verification, community notification, and periodic audit. The Sandwell Declaration predated these rules. Because it had never been contested, it was immune to retroactive enforcement. Digital land databases treated the property as a non-updating legacy. Metadata associated with the parcel contained a lock status, which prevented modification without explicit override from a senior administrator. No such override had been requested. The parish remained uneditable, except under exceptional conditions which had not occurred. Its digital presence consisted of a static record with no active fields. A surveyor contracted for a regional utility project in 2025 noted the presence of an unmapped structure during terrain assessment. The note appeared in a supplementary document as a non-priority observation. No follow-up was ordered. The utility lines were routed along a different corridor. The parish remained disconnected, untouched by the extension. Its legal immunity remained intact. No lien had ever been recorded. No violation had been cited. The building's exemption remained enforceable, regardless of occupancy or condition. The structure could stand indefinitely under current classification. No mechanism existed within local governance to initiate reassessment in the absence of external claim or development pressure. Within digital planning tools used by zoning departments, the parcel was labeled inactive exempt. The label prevented automatic inclusion in redevelopment modeling. Analysts relying on these tools would not encounter the site unless searching legacy records directly. The parish existed outside routine workflows, referenced only through deliberate access. As 2025 continued, the status of Charleston Parish remained unchanged. It persisted within the administrative landscape, not through significance, but through omission. It was protected not by interest but by irrelevance. The property stood apart from systems designed to manage change because it had never changed. In the final quarter of 2025, a remote property classification review was conducted by a contracted data firm working on behalf of the state registrar. The firm was tasked with verifying dormant religious designations for digital ledger consistency. Using automated pattern recognition, it identified 49 entries that exhibited the characteristics of long-term exemptions without transaction history. One of these was the Charleston Parish site. The review flagged the entry based on the absence of changes in zoning, ownership, correspondence, or occupancy status since 1872. However, due to internal policy, any file that had not been legally contested or administratively misclassified was ineligible for alteration by contracted analysts. The Charleston Parish case was recorded as reviewed, no edit authorized. The classification was then restored to its prior dormant state and excluded from the batch summary. The analyst assigned to the record included a marginal note indicating the entry's structural formatting suggested it had been ported directly from a pre-automated database. She noted its age, intact formatting, and lack of supplemental notations. The file was returned to archival status. The note was not included in official correspondence. Meanwhile, outside administrative frameworks, the site began to appear incidentally in independent public records projects. A non-governmental land use transparency initiative published a document listing all parcels across the state that had not been associated with a building permit, owner contact, or legal dispute for a period exceeding 125 years. The Charleston Parish appeared on page 7 of the report. The listing included only 3 fields: parcel number, land use category, and classification status. The classification was listed as exempt religious, dormant. The report was publicly available for 2 weeks before being updated with corrected formatting. In the revised version, several entries were removed due to classification ambiguities. The Charleston Parish identifier was among those excluded. The removal was not explained. The project did not issue commentary on specific records. The updated report received minimal distribution. In late November 2025, a graduate seminar on regional governance at a state university assigned students to trace the history of unaltered land records. One group selected Charleston Parish based on its appearance in the earlier transparency report. Their preliminary findings indicated a full exemption record with no subsequent interaction. The students prepared a presentation noting the legal viability of dormant structures persisting outside state review. However, upon request for more documentation, they were advised that the exemption file was not accessible through the university's database license. The presentation was modified to include the parish only as an example of inaccessible exemptions. One student attempted to identify the structure through publicly available imagery. Satellite archives confirmed the continued presence of a rectangular structure with no clear path or drive. No updated images were available. There was no evidence of roof collapse or wall separation. The structure appeared physically consistent with previous decades. The student included a single reference slide showing the image with a caption reading, "No verified access route. Legal status unchanged." No follow-up research was assigned. Throughout that year, no new entries or queries appeared in any state planning report referencing Charleston Parish. No rezoning application was submitted. No municipal development plan included the parcel. No tax reassessment effort included it in the exemption rollback review. Its presence on administrative lists remained static. At the community level, the site did not re-enter public awareness. Local directories contained no mention. Emergency response agencies maintained no contact point or coverage assignment for the parcel. It appeared only in dormant indexes and legacy exemption scans. When volunteers conducting a county-wide geotagging project noted the presence of a structure in the approximate location of the parish, they marked it unclaimed, exempt, historical. The tag was not included in the final dataset due to lack of supporting information. The classification remained valid. The laws under which the parish was exempt had not been repealed. The procedural framework that allowed it to persist had never required validation of function beyond the original declaration. That declaration, dated 1835, continued to stand unamended and uncontested. It remained the foundation of the property's status. By December, internal registries used by clerks for dormant file verification included the parish in a non-actionable tier. This tier represented parcels that, while technically active in legal terms, required no further intervention due to their procedural position. These files could be retrieved for audit, but were not subject to annual checks, stakeholder notifications, or automatic digitization requests. Charleston Parish was logged within this category under a date code matching its last verified exemption update. The structure had not been demolished. No condemnation order had been filed. There were no photographs uploaded to the statewide visual registry since the 1980s. The structure's compliance was maintained not through oversight, but through stability. Its lack of change rendered it immune to procedural review. In archival systems, the record remained classified under a locked tier. This meant that any attempt to alter or review its legal status required direct approval from a senior archival officer. The requirement had been implemented decades earlier during a general lockdown of legacy files. Because Charleston Parish had never triggered a reassessment event, its lock remained in place. No such override had been requested. As the year concluded, the property's classification remained legally enforceable. The exemption could not be revoked through automation. It could not be reassigned through omission. It had not been removed through consolidation, nor had it been overlooked in error. It remained because each system that handled it had chosen not to remove it. The legal environment permitted such survival, and no procedural contradiction had emerged. The building's condition, occupancy, and interior remained unverified. No agency had stepped forward to assume jurisdiction. No diocese had claimed oversight. No civic body had invoked responsibility. The property remained in situ, its designation intact, its identity unchanged. The legacy of Charleston Parish is not one of transformation or influence. It is not a monument, nor is it a remnant of broader institutional collapse. Its significance lies in its procedural resilience. It exists as a fully legal structure within state jurisdiction, protected by laws no longer tested, supported by records no longer examined. It did not evade oversight. It did not require secrecy. It remained precisely as it had been declared, unchallenged, unmoved, and continuously exempt. If this story impacted you, if you stayed until the end, it's because you feel these hidden truths also need to be exposed. So leave in the comments the city you're watching from. This way we can see how far these stories are reaching, and subscribe to the channel. There are many other cases the world tried to forget, but we insist on remembering. This story was taken from documents that were found. All names have been edited to protect the source.